Today is April 18th, and on today's episode, we will be looking at Matchday 33. We will be looking at all that went down. We will be looking at the table as well, looking at what all of it means, looking at who's where and what's what, getting into Champions League quarterfinals, everything that went on across Europe in those 4 games. And then we will also get into Matchday 34, what is coming up this weekend, what are the games to watch, and who do you need to be looking out for? And finishing up with the FA Cup semi-final, looking at the 4 teams, looking at Manchester United playing Leeds United, and looking at Spurs playing Everton for the FA Cup at Wembley. You will not want to miss it. And let's get started now. Welcome back to another episode of Around the Federation. My name's Coco. I am the owner of Manchester United. I am also the commissioner of this great league, the Armchair Soccer Federation. We are a English Premier League sim league on YouTube. We also have our games going through the Armchair Soccer Federation YouTube channel, as well as the Armchair Sports Universe YouTube channel. You can catch us on either of those channels for everything going on. Let's get jumped into it. Let's just go right to it. Matchday 33, what happened? The first one we have up is this silly game from my team, Manchester United, playing Bournemouth. Manchester United is coming off a long run of playing midweek, weekend, and we needed rotation. So we rotated the whole lineup. We rotated in 3 new midfielders who had not played for us to this point. All 3 of them were under 65 overall. One of them was 60, one was 62, and I think one was another 60, I think. I need to go back and look. So I was fully expecting to lose this game. This was not a game I expected to win. I was fully ready to write in a loss, give up on third and move on, right? I mean, we have Champions League coming up. We have FA Cup coming up. There's all kinds of stuff coming up. I did not expect us to do that well, or maybe I didn't expect Bournemouth to be this bad. They are not good. Manchester United wins 7-2. I can't explain it. There's no explanation for it. There's no, tactically we did this and our players did well, and this is how we lined up well against Bournemouth. No, they're just bad. That's all there is to it. That's all the reasoning I can give you. If you play Bournemouth the next few weeks, put them away. Just don't play with it. Just beat them. They're not good. Anybody should be able to do this. I don't understand. I don't get how Bournemouth could be that inept against an entire midfield of not good players for a Premier League team. It's not like they're not good for anything. They are just not good for the Premier League. They are not to that level. There's no reason for Bournemouth to have done this badly. Way to go, Cherries. You helped me out. You did me a solid. Next up, Aston Villa pulls out an insane 3-3 draw against the fading Champions League hopefuls, Arsenal. And they've now continued. Aston Villa, in my notes it had a they, but I wasn't sure who the they was. Aston Villa continue a 4-match winless streak. They have 2 draws, 2 losses, and they are solidly stuck in the mid-table. It is a tough run of games for Villa. They've played some tough teams, but to go 4 games without a win is always going to hurt. Villa is not a team that can take these positions for granted. They need all the revenue they can get to be able to bring in players that they desperately need if they have any hope of doing like their real-life counterparts and compete in Europe, to be able to compete in Europa League and Conference League, hopefully one day to get into Champions League, right? Next up is Brentford, who got a solid 1-0 win over Sheffield. Clean sheets are difficult to come by in this league. just having an entire game where your defense and your goalkeeper keep everything out for an entire game, it's hard to do in this league. Well done to Brentford. They keep collecting points. They keep just getting results. They have now gotten results in 4 of their last 5 games. This is a respectable side. This is not a Brentford team that you expect to do poorly. This is not a Brentford side you expect to have an easy time against, and they've done well. I've been pleasantly surprised with how the players they brought in January have done. This is a good team going forward, and I think next season they should look to get even better. Brighton versus Burnley. Brighton gets a much-needed win over Burnley. Again, another clean sheet. This is one of the few times Brighton have actually gotten one. Well done to Brighton. They never looked like they were getting threatened. Burnley never really looked like they had it today. I think that's a solid result for Brighton as they look to close out the season and move on to the summer and get past this season. This has been one to forget for Brighton. Hopefully they're able to turn this into a few good results moving forward. Next up is Chelsea versus Everton. This was a ridiculous game. This is a draw that feels like a win for Everton as they scored 2 goals in the final 10 minutes to come back and pull a draw out of the jaws of certain defeat. If you're Chelsea, this feels like a loss. You had a 3-1 lead heading into the 80th minute, and then you give up 2 goals, one by Nicolas de la Cruz and one by Timo Werner. This is, it's brutal. Chelsea should have had a win here. They should have gone into this and come out with 3 points. This should have helped them get closer to locking up, staying up in the Premier League. Unfortunately, I guess they ran out of gas. I guess the players just couldn't cover it anymore. Everton, they came in motivated. They knew what they had to do. This was a huge game for them, and it ends 3-3. It's not a bad result by any means. Just expect better from Chelsea. Next up is Liverpool and Crystal Palace. This one, Liverpool needed it. They needed to get the win to stay within touching distance of Manchester United, and they end up winning 5-1. This is... It's an aberration of a result for Crystal Palace. They had been doing well. They had been holding teams down to lower scores, but then to give up a crooked number to Liverpool like that, a Liverpool team that really, when you look at the top of the table as we see it, they're one of the top scoring teams. So it was kind of a no-win situation for Palace, but it does still suck to see them give up all those goals. Man United is still holding on, still moving through. So for Liverpool to get this win, they needed it. They needed to stay within touching distance of Manchester United. So Liverpool gets the result they need, and they continue to stay in 5th. Manchester City and Luton. City wins 3-1. The only thing that really can be said here is that it could have been worse. It probably should have been 5 or 6 for City, but yeah, City have other games coming down the barrel. They're not too worried about Luton. Luton is a championship team. They are heading down this season. Cool, move on. There's not a whole lot of analysis here for it. Nottingham Forest and Wolves drew 1-1. A fairly unremarkable game, a fairly uneventful game. Wolves needed to do better if they had any intentions of finishing in a Europe spot this season. They don't appear to be that motivated, and Forest pulls a good point. Forest can be proud of this point. They'll hold on to it and, close out the season doing well. West Ham playing Fulham. West Ham beats Fulham 3-0 to remain the best of the rest. This West Ham team could be a sneaky good team next season. I think with the right spending in the right places, this West Ham team, they could be a lot better than best of the rest. They could be challenging for 5th or 6th next season. I don't think they will fall off. I don't think they'll really need to sell that much either. I don't know that they'll need to have a big drop-off to be competitive or to get the money in they need to be competitive. I think that's going to be a good team next season. So look for them. Look to see what they do in the summer. Finally, to wrap it up for match day 33, Tottenham beat Newcastle 3-2, and Spurs remain 7 points clear of Man City for the title. Newcastle, they will fall to 9 points back of first, 2 points back of City for second. Just like we talked about with Chelsea, missing opportunities, missing a chance for points. Newcastle had a point in hand going into the 85th minute, and then they let Spurs go down on a counterattack in the 85th minute, and Kulusevski had as much time as he could possibly want in the box, got a nice open look at goal, and he bangs it in the back of the net. Unfortunately, that means Newcastle dropped all three. This should have been a draw for Newcastle, but unfortunately it ends up being a second straight loss for the Magpies. Newcastle has a rough game in matchday 34, but they're able to solely focus on it. And I think that's going to be something that helps them. They're able to put their best roster forward, their best foot forward for these games, and they're looking forward to Man United now. This was a brutal game, and I know they're happy to put it behind them. Next, we will look at a real quick table review, looking at where we stand now after matchday 33. As mentioned before, Tottenham now 7 points over City, 9 points over Newcastle. With 5 games to go, that lead is looking really good. Look for them to hold on to it. I don't think that we'll see what Manchester City has to say in matchday 34, but I think our title race may be coming to an end, and that it sucks to say, but I think it's cool to have a team like Tottenham that has had the building blocks put in by their owner, Vic. He has done the work. He spent the money. He's, put in all the hours and the work to do this lineup, to get the tactics right. They are a very deserving title-winning team. And sitting in third, Newcastle, they got some work to do, and they have a really tough game coming up against Manchester United, who is at this point looking at, after match day 33, Newcastle is only 7 points ahead of United. Now, I know we just had, 7 points for Tottenham to Man City, but that 7 points for Newcastle to Man United feels a lot shorter than the 7 points of Tottenham to Man City. Now, we'll obviously have to come back to this next week because Tottenham and City are playing each other. Newcastle and Man United are playing each other. So this will all work itself out. This should all get pretty solved this weekend. And if it's not getting solved, it means we had some crazy results. If the two Manchester teams win this weekend, then I think we will have a couple of races to watch going into the final weeks of the season. Liverpool remains 4 back of Man United for 4th. Liverpool are hanging on. They're keeping in touch. But as long as United keep winning, Liverpool is just going to be stuck spinning their tires. Not upset about that. Cool. I hope they drop off. It'd be nice if they could drop a few. Let me get some breathing room for 4th. Behind them is Arsenal, who still have a dream of Champions League for next season, as they're 4 points back behind Liverpool for 5th. But they cannot afford to drop any results with only 5 games remaining. I think Arsenal is going to be the next team to kind of drop out of this as we see the end of the season coming, as we see teams start to understand their fate. West Ham holding down the rest of the best, holding down that gatekeeping for the top 6. They are 10 points behind Arsenal for 6th and 3 points ahead of Wolves. The Hammers are doing their job. Hammer down. Brentford jumping Villa was a cool result this weekend. So now Brentford are only a point behind Wolves, and that mid-table race continues to be our best race that we have across the table. And I'm keeping my eyes on it just to see what Brentford do, because they have done so many moves. They made so many changes in January. How they finish will be a really interesting watch. It will be. Everton and Brighton kind of can lock in their status with Premier League football for next season if they're able to get wins, if they're able to have at least one other result go their way. Chelsea also needs to get a win this weekend. They can't afford to drop any more points. They could almost secure their place up in the Premier League for next season. That would be a huge, huge accomplishment for Chelsea after all they've been through. Looking back at the Champions League quarterfinals, the second legs that we just had, we had a couple of the ties that were really uncompetitive, that at least one of them got competitive. The first one is Bayern Munich and Barcelona. Bayern Munich came into the second leg down 4-0, and they made it competitive. They got really close. At one point, they had it level, 4-4 on aggregate, but Barcelona, even sleepwalking Barcelona, can still pull it out. They do get one goal to take the tie as the Bayern comeback falls just short, and Barca will move on winning 5-4. If you haven't watched that second leg, I encourage you to. It was a very good game. Bayern looked like they could have had it. They looked like if you give them maybe 5 or 10 more minutes, I think Bayern gets that fifth goal that could have made it a really interesting finish. Next up is Inter Milan and Manchester United. Inter comes into the second leg down 3-1. They needed a lot of work. And I'm going to be honest with you, I had no interest in playing my guys full throttle for this one. We came in, we sat back, we let things do what they were going to do, and Inter was only able to score one goal on us. I'm happy with that. Yes, we lost the second game 1-0. You take that 1-0 and you run, all right? I'm not going to sit here and act like, we should have done better. We really, no, man. We got too many games right now to really be going full throttle for all of these games. Losing 1-0 when we were up 2, that's perfect. Move on, keep going. Semifinals are coming up. PSG and Real Madrid. This game, the first leg, looked fantastic. It looked like it was going to be a really good second leg, and PSG did absolutely nothing. Real Madrid came in and ran them off the pitch, 3-0 over the Parisians. Real Madrid is the class of Champions League, and even in our league, they remain as such. I am not looking forward to it. We'll talk more about the semifinals here in a minute, but my Manchester United are playing Real Madrid in the semifinal. I have no idea what to expect in terms of performance, in terms of, can my team pull it out? No clue. The final quarterfinal that we have is Atletico Madrid and Manchester City. City had a whale of a lead after the first leg, and they were happy to let Madrid take the ball and try to beat them with it. City still ended up winning the second leg 2-1, winning the tie 7-2. Not a ton to talk about. Manchester City keep rolling. They keep doing what they're doing. Good on them. They've been consistent. They've been pretty good here in the second half of the season. So that gives us our semifinals for the Champions League. Those matchups are Barcelona and Manchester City, and then you have Real Madrid and Man United. That Barcelona-Man City matchup is going to be really good, I think. That could be 4-4 after the first leg. I don't see that being low scoring. I don't see a lot of defense in there. That could be a really high-scoring, exciting matchup to watch. I will definitely be taking note of what goes on there. And then my matchup, Manchester United and Real Madrid. Madrid have Bellingham. They have Vinicius. They are a well-built team. They are a well-constructed team. They are going to be really hard to beat. And, PSG with Kylian Mbappe and Mo Salah did not get a goal. They got beat 4-0 over 2 legs. My attack is going to have a lot of work to do to beat that Real Madrid defense. getting into Matchday 34, getting into this weekend's games, we've got some really good ones, and not just the top four that are playing each other, that are cannibalizing each other. There's some other really good games across the table. First up is Brighton hosting Chelsea. Both teams need the win, and either team can all but lock up staying up for next season, and they both should be ready to go for this game. This is a control-your-own-destiny type of game for both. I look for Chelsea to control the game and most likely get the win here. They need to be focused. Brighton, even if Brighton lose this game, I don't think they'll have too much of a relegation scare, but this could be one where Brighton sneaks up on Chelsea if they're not careful. Next up, we have what happened to my notes? Hold on. Something happened with my notes there. The next up is Crystal Palace West Ham. That's the next one I was talking about. My notes got weird. Crystal Palace West Ham. This is a great measuring stick game for Palace. They have not done well against Liverpool. They did well against Manchester City, but those are two teams that are not in their tax bracket. Those are two teams that are not spending the same amount of money. So what can they do against a team that is kind of in their spending range, that is in their talent range? What do they do against West Ham, who have done really well as the gatekeepers of the top six? I think that is going to be a really fun one to watch for Palace, to see where they're at, to see how they can measure up against a team that, if they want to say that they're, moving into the top half of the table, this is the kind of team you have to beat. You have to be able to beat West Ham. So it should be a fun one. Next up is Everton hosting Nottingham Forest. Everton, if I'm going to be honest, Everton will be rotating in this game. They have the FA Cup semifinal next week against Tottenham. So this could be an opportunity for Forest to get a nice result. This Forest team has been pretty inconsistent, but they have a really interesting roster build. And I think no matter what happens in this game, Forest is an interesting team that I'll be watching to see how they build on this success they've had. But I don't think Everton's going to have too much to offer here. I look for Forest to handle business. Everton has a big game coming up next week, and their lineup will show that they have a lot coming up. They need to do well here against Forest, but they also have a big game coming up. Next up is Fulham hosting Liverpool. This is my sneaky good game of the week. This is one that, looking at the table, you kind of think it might be a run over for Liverpool. But Fulham are having a really up and down time of it, and they're really hard to predict. Liverpool cannot afford to slip up in this one. They need to be getting points out of this because you don't know what's going to happen in the Manchester United game. They've got that tough game against third-place Newcastle. Liverpool have to be ready to capitalize on this one. This is an opportunity for them. This is a weekend for them to make up ground. I don't think, while Liverpool should not struggle, they cannot afford to struggle at this point in the season. They need to be putting points away, taking advantage of opportunities where teams ahead of them might be dropping points. Looking at, I did it again. I don't know what happens in my notes, I'm a bad note taker, y'all. I'm going to be honest with you. Oh, that's why I'm a bad note taker. The game is Luton versus Brentford. Brentford has looked like, as I've said before, they have been a solid team, and it's Luton Town. I'm not going to say too much here. Brentford, handle your business, do your thing, keep moving on. Y'all are doing great. And you're up against a Luton team that can't stop a runny nose. So go out there and get it done. Sheffield and Burnley is the next one up. Sheffield United playing Burnley. This is a relegation six-pointer. Two teams separated by 1 point in the standings, and there's not that much runway left. There will be 4 games left after this, and both teams desperately need 3 points here. I think this is going to be an ugly game. I think it is going to be a hard-to-watch game, but I also think we're in for a really ugly 1-1 draw or something, 0-0 draw. It'd be really weird to see a 0-0 draw, I think we've seen it 3 times this season for it over the whole season. I think we've seen it 3 times in our league. But that's the kind of feel I get off of this game. I don't think it's going to be very fun, very entertaining to watch. But if it is, hey, good on them. Wolves and Arsenal. I got really sloppy with my notes, y'all. I'm sorry. Wolves is playing Arsenal this weekend. Wolves are in a tough spot, a tough fight right now to keep their spot in the upper half of the table. They need this game as much as Arsenal do. Arsenal need to stay within touching distance of Liverpool and of the top 4. Arsenal, man, they've had a tough run of games recently. I didn't write anything down, but they got a draw against Aston Villa, and then the game before that they played Brighton. So they've had an up and down time of it, but Arsenal is the type of team with the type of budget they have that they should be doing better than they are. 6th place is a tough spot to be for a team like Arsenal. So Arsenal need this win. Wolves could probably use the points anyway, but I think Arsenal handles business here. Getting into 2 of our games of the week, we have 2 of them this week. We have Manchester United versus Newcastle. This is 3v4 in the table. Contrasting setups for the teams. Both teams are playing outside of their norm, outside of their comfort zone this weekend. It's going to be a weird one, y'all. This one, Manchester United is setting up with 4 defenders, 1 midfielder, 5 attackers, a very attacking setup, a very aggressive setup from Manchester, while Newcastle are kind of taking the opposite approach, setting up with 5 defenders, a box midfield, 2 defensive midfielder, 2 attacking midfield, and 1 striker in the formation. There's a lot on the line for both of these teams. If Newcastle's able to pull it out against United, it will all but condemn them to 4th. They'll be stuck there, and that'll probably be curtains on United's dream of finishing 3rd. I don't know that it's a very good dream anyway. But, or if Manchester United is somehow able to beat Newcastle, if they are able to pull it out against a very defensive setup for the Magpies, then Manchester can drag Newcastle back into a race for 3rd, and that is exactly what Newcastle can't have right now. Newcastle's still looking in front of them. They're still trying to catch City, but losing this game would be very detrimental for Newcastle's hopes because, it drags them into a race for 4th. They have to try to hold off United for the last 4 games of the year. So this will be a very competitive game. I look at it to be a draw. I think it should be something pretty good, 1-1, 2-2, something like that. I don't think there's going to be a lot of goals. I think it's going to be a lot of both teams banging their head against the wall in this one. But it should be a good game to watch. Finally, for Matchday 34, we have Spurs hosting Manchester City. Spurs are continuing a brutal run of games after beating Newcastle. Congratulations, you beat Newcastle. You got Manchester City for your troubles. So they beat second place Newcastle to drop them to 3rd, and now Manchester City, who jump up into 2nd, are now getting to play Spurs. This will also be a game of contrasting styles. Spurs have picked up they've used a very interesting setup this year with I think it's a 3-4-2-1, 3 defenders with 4 in the midfield, and then 2 attacking midfielders or 2 forwards next to a striker. Kolo Muani has been huge for Spurs. He's been their best player. He's been their best attacker, their best scorer. I look for this to continue against a City defense that has had its moments. They have had their moments against the top teams. I think Tottenham can pull this out. But if I had to bet on one, I'd probably say it's a draw. Probably. I think we get the best out of both sides in this one. And while Tottenham may have a advantage in this one, I think it's going to be a draw. But it should be a good game. Looking forward to next week, we have the FA Cup semifinal as well. As I said in the open, we have Leeds United playing Manchester United and Everton playing Spurs. All of those games will be at Wembley. Leeds will have the perfect setup here to pull a huge upset over Manchester United. United are having to rotate this game because, we've played Inter and Newcastle back to back, so we eventually have to give rest to our guys. So Leeds are kind of catching us at the best time here. We are going to have to put a lesser lineup out for a semifinal, which sucks to say, it sucks to hear, but it just is what it is. It's the way the calendar fell. We need to catch our breath before we have more league games, more Champions League. The FA Cup is important. We want to go for it, even though we hadn't really planned on it at the beginning of the year. Here we are at the semifinal. So we're going to do our best tactically and our best in terms of game plan, even if we can't put out the best lineup. The second semifinal is Spurs versus Everton. Everton is rotating this weekend so that they can put their best lineup forward for the semifinal, and Spurs will be rotating for the semifinal as well as Man United after them having their brutal game against Manchester City. This is a good Everton team, y'all. I think they really could sneak up on Spurs and give them a run. If I had to bet on it, I think it's going to be going to extra time. I think it'll be level after 90 minutes, and I think it's going to take all 120 for Spurs to finally pull a lead out over Everton. That is all I have for this week. That is all the notes I've got. That's all the stuff I wanted to cover. Next week, I'll be looking at starting doing some team breakdowns of kind of where teams are at, who's done well in the season, who's disappointed, who's been kind of where we thought they would be. So look forward to that in next week's episode. My name's Coco. I will see y'all in the next one. Have a great rest of your day and week. Thank y'all.